Hey, my seventh grade class. Today I want to spend a few moments with you guys talking about ancient Rome geography. You guys will be reading this week in your textbook, Chapter 8, Section 1, which will dig a little bit deeper into the geography of ancient Rome. So, we spent a lot of time this year talking about geography, building on what you guys learned in sixth grade. And really, the reason why we talk about geography is it's very important for people's way of life. Um, so it influences people's way of life. Are they close by? Are they far from others? We just got done talking about Greece. In Greece, because of the way the geography was, you had the city states, and it was very hard for those city states to come together to unite. The next thing is military protection. What kind of natural barriers do you have? And we'll talk a little bit further about some of these natural barriers in Rome. Rome is shaped like a peninsula. It's got water all around. Um, it's got some rugged terrain, but it's not as tough as the way Greece was. There's some natural barriers like mountains, and we'll get into talking about that a little bit more. There's also some natural resources. What's naturally occurring that people need? Certainly, water is very important for life, but then you also have to consider, what kind of crops can they grow? What other kind of natural resources is there? Different types of metals, things like that. Climate, you have to consider what the climate is like near the Mediterranean Sea. So, because Italy is pretty much right next to Greece, a lot of the climate is going to be very similar. And then finally, farming. How is the soil? Rome is actually going to be or have some pretty fertile soil, especially by the water along the coast and the rivers that run through Rome. So a little bit about the Roman geography. Mountains. Like I said, there's a line of mountains that runs across the top of Italy that separates it from Europe. Those are called the Alps. And then you have the Apennines, which run almost down Italy. Italy is a peninsula. It's got water on all sides of it. It looks like a high-heeled boot. Uh, Pretty simple geography-wise. A lot of people are able to identify Italy on a map fairly easily. There's islands. The biggest island that we'll talk about is the island of Sicily. So if Italy is shaped like a boot, the boot kicks the island of Sicily, and I'll point that out on the map in a moment. You also have Sardinia and Corsica. You have mountains, but you also have hills. The city of Rome is built on hills um, along actually a river called the Tiber River. So you also have water. Like I said, the Tiber River. You have seas on three sides: the Mediterranean Sea, the Ionian Sea, and the Adriatic Sea. So if we take a look at this geography real quick, I want to point out some of those things. So here's Italy. It's shaped like a boot. Oops. The boot kicks Sicily, and then you have Sardinia and Corsica. The Apennines run down the boot, and then about halfway, about right there, is where you have the city of Rome, because this is the Tiber River right here. And I said it's pretty close to Greece. If you look to the east, you'll see Greece here. Something that I want to point out here at this point, Rome is going to build an empire. So it starts with the city. Eventually, it'll be all of Italy. And then eventually, everything that's shaded in here will be part of the Roman Empire. The other thing that I now that we're talking about Rome eventually being an empire, um, Rome sits in a very interesting point in history. Its early part is considered ancient history, but then at the end of Rome, you transition into the Middle Ages. And as you get closer to the Middle Ages, you get closer to what we consider modern history. So Rome sits at that transitional period. And there's a lot of very interesting things that happen in Rome that we'll talk about later on. So the chapter is also going to talk about how Rome began. some of the origin stories. One that I really like and have always been interested in is a tale of Romulus and Remus. And you guys will read a little bit about that story. And then you have the story of Aeneas. Comes from a book called the Aeneid. Um, it ties in Greek and Roman history together. Rome takes place relatively around the same time as Greece, maybe a little bit later. And those two origin stories, the Romulus and Remus story and the Aeneas story, um, it's part of the mythology of Rome. So, as you will see, these stories are probably most likely not true. Um, and they're kind of these heroic stories along the way. Um, in actuality, it was the Latins. The Latins will eventually be taken over by the Etruscans, and then ultimately the Tarquins will take over. So one thing to point out about Rome, and Rome is going to become very powerful and become this large empire, is considering two things: economic and military power. So Rome is going to become powerful in both of these respects. Economic power, be able to influence other people or societies through trade, buying, or selling. And certainly Rome will be powerful because of that. And then not only that, but also the military power, the ability to use force or threat of force to influence other people or societies. And that's part of how Rome will grow to that vast size that we talked about earlier. So, a little bit about this week's assignments. The first one is this slides presentation, and you watched it, so I'll tell you guys good job. The second is a geography worksheet. It gives you 4 aspects of the Roman geography, and then there's some questions to fill in as you work through it. That's an assignment that if you guys want to spend a little bit of time on Thursday talking about during the Zoom, we can certainly do that. And then you guys have the 8.1 guided reading. Again, we have the Zoom on Thursday at 10 a.m. I'm also working on some surprises this week. So that'll be outside of the Zoom, and it'll be something for you guys to look forward to. All right. Have a good week, guys, and I'll see you all on Thursday.